a few minutes and wait for a couple other people to hop on. Until then, just sit tight. Hello, everyone. We're going to start the webinar at this point. My name is Clark Stevenson. I am a Civic Spark Fellow working with...
This is Jonathan Parfrey.
Sorry about that technical difficulties. To review this slide, Sierra Camp stands for Sierra Climate Adaptation and Mitigation Partnership and is a partnership of Sierra organizations, businesses, and local governments promoting climate adaptation and mitigation strategies across the Sierra. Sorry about that, my mute button is going in and out. But we now have 31 members, with Mono County being our latest addition. If you'd like to become a member, reach out to us directly, and our contact information is located on our website or at the end of this webinar. Our
Can anyone hear us now? Okay, great. Sorry, folks. We're having weird technical issues with the mute button going off by itself.
So to continue from where we left off, our Climate Ready Communities is a new that has been launched within the last month. It is a national program organized through GEOS Institute, and we are one of 15 communities that are participating in this program, and it seeks to build a technical capacity for climate adaptation planning and action in local government operations. We will be doing a lot more work throughout the year to make this fully unveiled, and we will contact anyone who's interested within the next few months about our updates. We also could not have been able to participate in this program without our donations from the Big Day of Giving, and we are humbly grateful to all those who have donated and confirming the need of this work in Sierra Nevada. So once again, thank you very much. Our Business Resiliency Workshop is one of our on-the-ground demonstration projects. We are currently having a workshop being hosted in Grass Valley on May 17th, starting at 8 a.m. It is a free event and is open to anyone in the surrounding area to learn about how businesses are impacted by wildfire threat and what those businesses can do to overcome the threat of disaster. We will be highlighting continuity plans, emergency kits, communication plans, as well as any issues relating to insurance within a high severity wildfire area. We have a few upcoming events that we are looking forward to. One of them is a statewide energy efficiency forum. Starting in June in Sacramento. The next event is Sierra Nevada Alliance, which is going to have a theme of regional resiliency. That'll be hosted in August in Tahoe. We will have, we are looking forward to the California Adaptation Forum, which is also being hosted in August in Sacramento, as well as the Global Climate Action Summit in September, hosted in San Francisco. And in 2019, the California Climate Change Symposium is something that we will be looking forward to as well. There are a number of new resources that have just come out recently, and these are all doing great work to engage the general public on forest management, headwater forest restoration, as well as the future of California's water situation. And we encourage everyone to look at some of these articles and reports. We also wanted to highlight the Wildlife Conservation Board's Climate Adaptation Grant. There's over $20 million pooled for wildlife and working land adaptation projects, as well as a portion of that pool of money going towards connecting urban-rural regions. It is a fairly simple application that is due on May 18th, and we encourage everyone to at least give it a look over, see if it does apply to your work. For our presenters today, we have Chris Mertens, who is the Government Affairs Director. He has more than 10 years experience in the government affairs, legislative advocacy, and campaign arenas from his work as a legislative consultant and registered lobbyist for a Sacramento lobbying firm specializing in environmental policy, as well as having experience as an associate environmental planner with the California Tahoe Conservancy. He will be reviewing Proposition 68 and the Water Supply and Quality Act of 2018, as well as other policy updates from the Capitol relevant to the Sierra. We also have invited Jonathan Parfrey, who is a ARCA member, as well as the founder of the Los Angeles Regional Collaborative for Climate Action and Sustainability, as well as being a founder of ARCA, the Alliance of Regional Collaboratives for Climate Adaptation. He is currently the executive director of Climate Resolve, an LA nonprofit that focuses on local solutions to global climate change. And we are looking forward to hearing what he has to say about his work in LA and what the city is doing to engage climate action, as well as speaking from experience as the founder of ARCA on the role of collaboration across regions in an era of climate change, as well as what might be needed to maintain any momentum that we have currently in the state. We look forward to hearing what he has to say, and at this point, I'm now going to pass it on to Chris Mertens.
Great. Hi, everybody, and apologies for the technical difficulties there, but it looks like folks are able to hear us. So we'll continue forward. As Clark said, my name is Chris Mertens. I'm the Government Affairs Director at the Sierra Business Council. And I'm going to update you on two main areas today. The first are a couple of statewide natural resources and water bonds. And the second is an update on some of the climate policies moving through the legislature this year. First, I want to make you aware that Sierra Camp just released a new white paper which details how those two upcoming statewide natural resources and water bonds would impact the Sierra region. Specifically, it looks at the bonds' impact on climate mitigation and resiliency efforts in the region. You can find copies of it on the Sierra Camp website, which will be linked at later in the presentation. But it's a great resource if you're giving any updates to your members, to your colleagues, or your constituents for a quick look at how these bonds will impact the Sierra region. Before I go into details on those measures, I want to set the stage for why investment is needed in our region. I know most of you are aware of this, but I think there have been a couple of recent reports that really provide a useful context and have gained some traction in Sacramento, and I just want to make sure everybody is aware of those. Some of the findings of these three reports include that the Sierra Nevada faces an unreliable and changing snowpack, which should be a cause for concern in the context of water supply for all Californians. Another finding is that extreme weather events have impacts to water infrastructure both locally and statewide. Another finding is that we're likely to see increased prevalence of drought and large, intense wildfire conditions. Another is wildfire prevention costs are largely cheaper than firefighting. Another finding is that we need to develop markets for wood products that offset the cost of restoration, so we don't have to use public funding all the time to do that work. And finally, the report stressed the need for headwater protection as a water supply and water quality need for the entire state. The other note here is that the forest carbon plan is going to be released very soon. I know folks have been saying that for a long time, but apparently it is going to be coming out in the next week or two. And that will focus on strategies to increase the carbon benefits of our forests, and will be an important report going forward. So I want to focus in a little bit on two major bonds. The first is Prop 68, and the second is the Water Supply and Water Quality Act of 2018. If they both pass, they will bring $492 million in funding for projects in the Sierra region. That's an unprecedented amount for our area. The first one is Prop 68 on the ballot statewide on June 5th, so just in a few weeks. That bond is a $4.1 billion bond for parks, water, and natural resource protection statewide. It was put on the ballot through the legislature last year. And this bond has been endorsed by many Sierra communities and organizations, including several local governments. Inyo and Mono counties have endorsed, as well as the town of Mammoth and Bishop and Truckee. And in addition to many others. The second bond is on the ballot in November, that I'll just refer to this as the water bond. That bond has $8.9 billion for water infrastructure, groundwater management, and water supply. The November bond is much more focused on water and water infrastructure than Prop 68. There's actually not a ton of overlap between the two bonds in terms of what they would fund. Although one of the areas where the two bonds do overlap is in how funding would be allocated to the Sierra. So this slide shows exactly how this funding would flow to the region. Largely through the Sierra Nevada Conservancy, the California Tahoe Conservancy, and the Wildlife Conservation Board. As you can see, Prop 68 has $142 million for the region, and the November water bond would have $350 million for the region. So some of the types of projects that this funding could go towards are fuel reduction projects, climate resiliency projects, recreation, forest health, water supply, restoration, and conservation. I want to dive a little bit deeper on how exactly these bonds would fund climate adaptation and mitigation projects. Both bonds would fund these efforts largely through the three agencies that I just mentioned. Each of those agencies has funded projects with connection to climate mitigation and/or adaptation historically. For example, the Sierra Nevada Conservancy has funded projects that seek to increase carbon sequestration capacity of wetlands and forests. And I should note that in Proposition 68, $25 million of the funding allocated to the Sierra Nevada Conservancy is for forest health projects to increase resilience and reduce wildfire risks in Sierra Nevada forests. The California Tahoe Conservancy has also funded climate resiliency projects in the past, and those that funding can support forest health projects as well, and also sustainable communities projects. And then finally, the Wildlife Conservation Board, that funding would be used to reduce wildfire risk and restore upper watershed lands in the Sierra Cascade region. Proposition 68 also has an entire funding tranche of $443 million specifically for climate adaptation and resiliency projects statewide. And these funds are allocated to several different state agencies, including Wildlife Conservation Board, DFW, Department of Food and Ag, CAL FIRE, and many others. And those can fund a variety of climate-related projects, such as projects that increase forest resiliency, improve carbon sequestration capacity of soil on farmlands, improving stream habitat for fish populations, and helping state parks adapt to climate change. In the November water bond, there's not a climate funding pot specifically, but instead those funds would be allocated through the Sierra Nevada Conservancy and California Tahoe Conservancy to do that type of work. If you're interested in finding more information on these two measures, I encourage you to check out that white paper that Sierra Camp just put out. You can see the link there. Or you can also look at the campaign websites for each of the measures and find a lot of information there. If you want to get involved directly with either of these two efforts, which I strongly encourage you to do, the emphasis right now is obviously on Proposition 68. We're in full get out the vote mode on this, and the Sierra Business Council is actually leading a group of nonprofits and organizations throughout the basin to get out the vote for that measure. Some of the ways you can do that are to post on social media, write about it in your e-newsletters to your membership. We're also putting on a workshop next Tuesday evening from 4 to 6 p.m. at the Auburn Ale House, where folks can come and learn more about Prop 68 if they're interested. The Sierra Business Council and Sierra Nevada Alliance are hosting phone banking events next week on Wednesday the 16th in South Lake Tahoe and Truckee. And also I have a ton of lawn signs available in my office that I would love folks to take. So if you're interested in learning more about any of those activities, please get in touch with me. I can make it very easy for you to post stuff on your social media by giving you content, and I can also give you content for newsletters and things like that. For the water bond, it's a little bit further out. So right now the campaign for that is seeking endorsements, donations, and if you are eager to get more intimately involved with efforts in the Sierra for that measure, we'll be leading the Sierra Task Force for that measure as well. So please do feel free to get in touch. Next, I want to give an overview on some climate policies that have been proposed in the state legislature this year. I'm going to go through a little bit of a budget update and then talk about some pending legislation that would affect the Sierra Nevada region. And then we'll have a little bit of time for Q&A. Just as a reminder, we're about halfway through the second year of our legislative session right now. So a lot of the bills that I'm talking about are still pending, or all of them are still pending. Quick update on the status of cap and trade expenditures in the state budget. The governor's proposed budget includes $2.8 billion in proposed expenditures. That includes $160 million for forest health projects, $25 million for local fire prevention grants, $35 million for climate energy research, and then several programs that have received funding in past years did not receive funding in the governor's proposed budget. That's DFW's wetlands program, WCB's climate adaptation program, and many of the urban forestry programs. And the reason for that is the governor argues that many of those types of projects would be covered under Prop 68 if it were to pass. A couple of things I'll note on the status of cap and trade revenues is that recent auctions of carbon credits have been pretty robust and show that since last year's legislation to extend the cap and trade program, that there's pretty strong demand for carbon credits on the market. And the LAO expects those auctions to continue bringing in significant revenue for the state, hopefully through 2030. So we're hopefully not going to see the volatility in carbon auctions like we did over the last 2 or 3 years, which is good. So just real quick, there are a couple of proposed augmentations to the cap and trade revenue expenditure plan for this year that have been proposed in the legislature. The Assembly has a proposal to use $400 million in expected additional cap and trade revenue to fund urban forestry, wetlands, and other natural resources programs. And the Senate has a proposal where to use cap and trade funding to fund a new climate adaptation program at the Wildlife Conservation Board and state conservancies for adaptation projects on natural and working lands. Just as a reminder, in the budget process, that the budget needs to be finished up by June 15th, so just a little bit over a month from now. And the governor's May revised budget will be released this Friday. So some of this could change when that's released, and certainly after the legislature and governor have negotiated a final budget deal in the next 5 or 6 weeks. A quick note on how the state budget is dealing with Prop 68. The governor is quite seemingly optimistic or hopeful about Proposition 68 passing because he has included in the budget for fiscal year 18-19 $1 billion in proposed expenditures from Prop 68. Of that $1 billion, $110 million would be for climate resiliency programs at the Resources Agency, WCB, DFW, and Conservancy. So let's hope the governor's impulse on that is correct. Next, I want to give an overview of some relevant pieces of climate legislation that are moving through this year. SB 100, which is, before I mention this, these are all pending bills that have now all passed out of at least their first policy committee hearing. Senator De Leon's SB 100, this is his bill that would require utilities in the state to procure 60% of their electricity from renewable sources by 2030 and 100% by 2045. It has been stalled since the end of last session in the Assembly Utilities and Energy Committee and could come back to life at some point here over the summer. SB 1015 by Senator Allen would establish a new program at the Wildlife Conservation Board and participating conservancies to fund climate resiliency projects on natural and working lands using cap and trade revenue. Projects include acquisition, wildfire risk reduction, forest health, and watershed restoration projects. That's one that folks are watching fairly closely. SB 1072 by Senator Leyva would establish a technical assistance program at the Strategic Growth Council for the purpose of helping under-resourced communities secure mitigation and adaptation funding. Under the program, regional collaboratives can form pursuant to the requirements in the bill and apply for funding from SGC to provide technical assistance to local organizations applying for climate funding. This is one that's especially relevant to Sierra Camp and the other ARCA members. If crafted, properly, and if it were to pass and be signed by the governor, it potentially is a way to get some funding into these regional climate collaboratives that the state has. And could be a pretty exciting opportunity. The bill did get fairly heavily amended coming out of the Senate Environmental Quality Committee a few weeks ago, and I know that the authors and sponsors of the measure are working to continue crafting that bill. So I do expect it to continue changing over the next few months. AB 2528 specifies that habitat resilience areas are included in the state's climate adaptation strategy and requires state agencies to maximize the objective of protecting and enhancing habitat resiliency areas in the Safeguarding California plan. There's mention in that bill specifically of Sierra Nevada mountain meadows. AB 2672 by Assemblymember Patterson requires the ARB and CAL FIRE to report GHG emissions from wildfires if they're over a certain size. And AB 1945 by Assemblymember Eduardo Garcia adds to the list of co-benefits recognized by ARB to include public access, access to services, and avoided emissions. Those are just a few of the climate bills we're focusing on this year. And I want to now move on to a couple of other bills that aren't necessarily related directly to climate, but would have an effect in the Sierra Nevada region. The first is AB 2849, that's authored by Assembly Members Stone and Dolly. That bill would establish the Sierra Nevada Conservancy's Watershed Improvement Program in statute, and in an effort to help it attract partners, funding, and recognition statewide. This is a bill that the Sierra Business Council is actually sponsoring, and would also make a couple of additional changes to the Sierra Nevada Conservancy's enabling statute by allowing it to partner with a broader set of tribal organizations in the region, and also make a couple of tweaks to their legislative liaisons to make sure that some of those liaisons come from outside of the Sierra Nevada region. If you're interested in supporting that measure, please let me know. It did get through its first policy committee hearing on a bipartisan 10-0 vote, and we're hopeful that it will continue moving forward this year. A couple other sets of bills I want to bring to your attention. There are several bills related to developing markets for wood products. Many of these are a direct response to the historic wildfire season last year. and they seek to offset the cost of forest restoration by spurring markets for mass timber products and streamlining the timber harvest plan process. We're keeping an eye on those. Another set of bills deal with prescribed fire. SB 1260 seeks to improve air quality and health monitoring of impacts from prescribed fire and wildfire in an effort to encourage more prescribed fire to happen. And AB 2551 allows CAL FIRE to enter into an agreement with private owners or public agencies to conduct joint prescribed burning operations that serve the public interest. Again, both of those are part of the slew of many bills that have been introduced this year in as a response to last year's wildfire season. Last, I want to make a plug for the Sierra Consortium, which is a group that is led by the Sierra Business Council, and it is a group of 6 land trusts and community organizations from the Sierra Nevada region that advocates in Sacramento for funding and policies that benefit the region. We're looking for new members. It is a nominal fee to join, but I think you get a lot of bang for your buck. The more members we have and the broader diversity in our membership we have, the greater impact we can have down in Sacramento. Just an example of the type of work that group, the type of work and the type of results that group has been able to have is that group was very involved with the negotiations in the legislature around the parks bond, what became Proposition 68. And we, along with our partners, were able to advocate that significant funding should be spent in the Sierra Nevada region in the bond. And sure enough, that ended up happening with that $142 million allocated to the region. So already having a good impact, and we're always looking for new members. That's it for me, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have. And my contact information is there on the screen, and feel free to get in touch. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Chris. And like you said, we are accepting questions in the Q&A box at this point. If you have anything, please go ahead and type it into the box. And I wanted to thank Chris once again for speaking in depth on the bonds and all the other climate-related legislation happening in the Capitol at this moment.
Yeah, and we have a question here from Devin, who asked, does any money go directly to California state parks? And the answer is yes. There are several pots of funding in Proposition 68 for state parks. One of them is $218 million to repair, restore, and protect state parks in general. And I know that there's also funding for state parks to increase their, to improve their climate resiliency. And there are, I believe, a couple of other pots that deal with some of the deferred maintenance issues that Sierra Parks have, or that California State Parks has been facing for some time.
Great, thank you, Chris. So it seems as if there are no questions. Oh, we have another one.
Yeah, so we have another question that asks, is there any funding for specific Sierra Nevada locations? So yes, in the November water bond, he's clarifying that related to, is there funding for any Sierra Nevada state parks directly? The answer is no. I don't believe that there are any specific state parks called out by Prop 68 or the water bond for investment. I'm not entirely sure how state parks as an agency likes to divvy up their funding to their parks, but I don't believe there is funding for either for a specific state park. That being said, you've actually raised a good point that in addition to the funding that I mentioned going to the Sierra Nevada and Tahoe Conservancies and WCB, there are several statewide competitive funding pots of funding in both of these bonds that organizations in the Sierra could compete for and apply for. So there's likely much more funding than that $492 million when all is said and done.
All right, thank you again, Chris. Yeah, we had a question about where I can learn more about the Sierra Consortium. So the best way to do that is to get in
touch with me directly, feel free to give me a phone call or shoot me an email, and I'd be happy to talk to you more about that group. We don't have a website or anything like that, but I can show you a bunch of examples of the type of work that we've done and certainly talk to you more.
All right. If there are no more questions for Chris, I think we're now going to transition into Jonathan Harfree's portion of the webinar. And if I could just ask Jonathan to now share his screen. Just giving a couple more minutes, more seconds for Jonathan to respond. Right. All right, there you go. Still waiting here for. All right, now we're.
We're just working on unmuting Jonathan, I think. Jonathan, are you able to unmute it on your end? Oh, there we go.
I just tried.
Can everyone hear Jonathan? Go ahead and type it in the chat box. Oh, great. Thank you. All right, Jonathan, looks like we can hear you.
Great. Well, hello, everyone. I didn't know I was going to be sharing my slides live, so I'll try to do my best. So I wanted to first start talking about Prop 68. And I wanted to share some of the communication materials that our organization has developed. First, our goal is to make the Prop 68 benefits relevant for an urban community in Los Angeles. And so, unfortunately, you can't see that these are GIF files, and there's movement and there's sound, and we wanted people in LA to recognize that even though there's a lot of resource conservation that's part of Prop 68, there is still a lot of benefits to an urban population. And so we did include a lot of these from the sort of the individual benefits to have a climate message. That's also part of it. And so I just wanted to, we've been putting this out on social media, and I think that there's been a pretty good response to that. I also wanted to talk about a few key bills. I just want to make sure people can hear me. Is that what's going on? Forgive me for being so technologically ignorant. I just want to make sure that folks can hear me.
Jonathan, you're loud and clear.
Yeah, are there is there a way that I could see that in the Q&A that people are responding? Is that happening now?
If you all can, there we go. We have a couple.
Jonathan, you're loud and clear, and we can see your slides and the PowerPoint. Can you hear us all right?
Your meeting ID followed by the pound or hash. Enter your participant ID followed by pound.
Hi, folks. It's Jonathan. Can you hear me? Hello?
Yeah, Jonathan, can you hear us? We can all hear you fine.
Yes. Okay. I'm sorry. I dropped off.
No
I'm
worries.
also getting an echo, so I think I'm on both.
Don't worry about it. We'll mute ourselves and then we won't have it.
Okay. All right. Thank you. So the three bills, I'm getting the echo still.
Jonathan, I think you're just going to have to power through it. Sorry about the echo. I don't know if you have a couple different speakers on your end or something, but we can hear you fine. It sounds great on our end. Actually, no, I'm not sure that we can hear you at all. Did you turn your mic off? Oh, there you go.
Hi,
Okay.
I'm going to try this here. I hope you can hear me.
Yep.
I apologize for the problems in participating on this.
No worries. Just
anyway, there are three bills that I think are absolutely critical, and I do this in the hope that you can hear me. One of them is SB 262 by Senator Wyskowski. It's going to change in the Assembly Natural Resources Committee next week. Currently, if you look up this bill on Ledge Info, you're not going to be getting much information other than it. There's some language about the state's Technical Advisory Council, and yes, and so the bill, Wyskowski's bill, is going to establish a new council on climate adaptation and resiliency. It would convert the current Technical Advisory Council to this new council. There would be appointed terms, and the Office of Planning and Research would be the lead. And the council would then be responsible for some of the key planning documents that the state develops, including the Adaptation Planning Guide, the Safeguarding California, and others. And however, as it currently is in draft form, it's not really clear how the council will coordinate within the state government, what that structure would actually tangibly look like. And it also doesn't it's not apparent how this effort would be funded, nor is it apparent how local governments would be engaged, and also how funds could formally engage local governments or the local collaboratives. So the bill is, I think, a really exciting opportunity. And as it appears in Assembly Natural Resources in this coming week, I really hope that Sierra Camp and others get involved with it. Senator Leiva's bill 1072 is mostly focused on technical assistance and technical assistance for low-income communities. And so, you know, as Chris pointed out, there are a lot of mechanisms associated with this, but it's that are not necessarily being funded. And we just don't know what'll come of that. Senator Allen's Bill 1015 is to fund the Wildlife Conservation Board, but our concern about that is that it talks about it being a resiliency program for the entire state, but it's very specific to the conservation of natural lands. Important as they are, it doesn't necessarily speak to the other resiliency needs that the state has. So there are a number of other bills, and many of them you heard from Chris as well, on things that that he wants to address. One of the other areas that I wanted to talk about is that that there are some bills having to do with water conservation at the local level, and I think that that is really critical and important, because if local communities are able to conserve water, that will leave more water in natural lands. And so there is legislation right now that Senator Hertzberg, SB 262, is moving, that if it's successful, I think will have really great benefits. The other things to address, and I'm sorry, I don't have a screen associated with this at this moment, is to briefly discuss the urban-rural connection. And our organization in Los Angeles has been communicating with Sierra Camp over the last few years to try to build that connection. And here in Los Angeles, if you did a poll on the street, I would say 98% of the people are completely ignorant about where their water actually comes from. And so folks don't know that their water comes from the Sierra Nevada or the Cascades or from the Colorado River watershed at all. And this is something that I think going forward, we're going to have to work on in these urban communities to realize the absolute dependence that urban communities have for the forests and mountains of California and beyond. So when I was the commissioner at the LA Department of Water and Power, I thought we made some real inroads in being able to remediate some of the problems in Owens Valley, especially around Owens Lake, and in other key areas. And I think that that process has started with a greater emphasis on local water within Los Angeles. And to that point, even though Climate Resolve very much supports Prop 68 and very much supports the water initiative that will be on the ballot in November, there's also an LA County water measure to capture more stormwater here in the region. And that measure will require 2/3 voter support to be able to pass. And so it's a very high hurdle, but it's something that we plan on pursuing anyway. I also want to talk a little bit about the group ARCA, the statewide collaborative of the regional climate collaboratives, and how important that is for the various regional collaboratives. And there's real value there. So not only is there access to to the current administration and to the decision makers, but there's also a really good opportunity for the groups to get regular information about upcoming regulation. I know that Sierra Camp has been very active when it comes to the state hazard mitigation plan that is currently being revised. There's also information provided about grant dollars coming down from Sacramento or from Washington. There's also sort of a running sort of list of various bills, legislation that would be of interest to people working on climate adaptation. And there's the exchange of ideas among the organizations themselves. Like one of the collaboratives just recently compiled a list of all of the vulnerability studies that have been done at a municipal level throughout the state. And there are other really cool things like that as well. The other purpose of the collaboratives, and it's something that I'm sure you've experienced, is that there is some aid and comfort in being able to be with like-minded people who are also working to make your region more resilient. And we found that to be very true with the Los Angeles collaborative. And because of this, we are attracting other collaboratives. There are two other now more rural collaboratives that have joined. The North Coast Resource Partnership, basically representing sort of Sonoma County North, has been now active in the ARCA family. There's a Central Coast Collaborative that is coming. There's organizing taking place to build up an Inland Empire regional collaborative. And the Bay Area Climate Collaborative is kind of shifted a few years ago, where they've had more of a regional governmental focus rather than the individual governments. And so now there is a new Bay Area collaborative of local governments that's in the very nascent stages, but is coming together. I wanted to introduce you to something that the LA Collaborative has also been doing as well, which is to create a framework of sort of climate action for the region itself. And I encourage you to go to the following website, www.climateaction.la. And on your screen, if you go to climateaction.la, you'll see this sort of in-depth plan on how Los Angeles can meet the climate challenge. It's been very, very interesting to deal with that. And also our region, of course, it's very urban. And so we have been focusing on ways in which we can do those adaptation measures at the local level. So we've had a really big focus on cool surfaces and urban tree canopy. There's been a lot of research that's taken place in this area, how we can cool down an urban area like LA. And for the city of LA, we were able to change the building code, requiring each and every new or refurbished roof to use high albedo materials that will actually reflect the sun's energy back into space and off of the rooftop. And this has been able to cool down the city considerably. There's over 13,000 homes over just the last 4 years have changed their roofing materials. So it's been a really exciting process. And we are anticipating later this month that LA County and its unincorporated areas will join the city of LA, city of Pasadena, and city of Santa Monica in promoting cool roofs. And we have a pretty aggressive, what they call solar reflectance index, SRI, for the cool roofing materials. So I just wanted to give a very quick impression of what's taking place at the LA Collaborative and the importance of the work that is taking place at the ARCA collaborative of collaboratives, and the important role that Sierra Camp has been playing over the last few years. Been absolutely critical to the statewide efforts. And I think there's been tremendous value for Sierra Camp as well, to learn from the other collaboratives, to impart their wisdom to the other collaboratives, and to also have access to some of the most important thinking taking place in the nation now on climate adaptation. And so that concludes my presentation. I'm happy to field any questions that you might have.
All right. Thank you so much, Jonathan. Can you hear me well? All right. Well, once again, thank you so much, Jonathan. And, you know, as you heard, Nikki jumped on the webinar to resolve a couple of technical difficulties. It takes a village even to create a webinar like this. So thank you for your patience and keeping with the webinar and listening to Jonathan's presentation on LARC, ARCA, and everything else. If you have any questions, please once again type them in the Q&A box. To start off, I'd like to ask you a question, Jonathan. Where do you see ARCA going in the future? It sounds like there's a lot of great collaborations that are happening between regions. And do you expect this to continue to happen? Do you expect it to evolve in any specific way, or what's your opinion? Can you hear me, Jonathan? Looks like we're still encountering some microphone difficulties. Jonathan, if you can hear me, just give me a holler, let me know. Right. So sounds like Jonathan audio has gone dark for a second. We're gonna try and solve that momentarily. Are there any other questions for Chris while we're figuring this out?
Hi, it's Jonathan. I believe I'm being asked if there are opinions on the future of ARCA. If folks can hear me, that's wonderful. If not, I'm talking to myself. The future of ARCA, I suspect that there will be some form of consolidation around how regional collaboratives are structured. And I believe it'll be necessary for there to be some joint powers authority given to the collaboratives. And I anticipate that happening, though it'll take about a decade, I think, for municipalities to recognize that there has to be some authority ceded to these regional collaboratives to help them with a number of their climate problems that they're going to have. Unfortunately, I don't anticipate that happening anytime soon. So I believe the collaboratives will create some kind of a government presence over the next few years, probably led by counties or by the municipal planning organizations and then will ultimately turn into JPAs after about 10 or 12 years or so. I just don't see it happening in the near term.
Right. Thank you very much, Jonathan. Hopefully you can still hear us. At this point, if there are no more questions, we will end the webinar early. And thank you all for participating and sticking with us throughout the webinar, even with our technical difficulties. If you have any more questions, you can email Chris or Jonathan directly, or you can
All right, folks,
contact.
listen, sorry about the technical difficulties. I'm going to sign off. Thanks so much. And just want to thank Nikki and Chris from Sierra Camp for the good work that they're doing. I hope everyone can recognize the value of that. Thanks so much. Bye.
Thank you again, Jonathan. And once again, to wrap up, if you have any more questions, you can contact Nikki at Garavelli at sierrabusiness.org. Thank you so much, and we are going to end the webinar.